Hello there, I'm Derek Fournier, and welcome to Plain Spoken, the podcast where we get real about business, leadership, and life. I've spent years in the trenches of leadership and team building, and now I'm bringing those conversations out into the open. We're going to talk strategy, dissect success, and maybe share a few laughs along the way. Each episode, I'll be joined by fascinating guests, from successful CEOs to brilliant minds shaking up their industries. We're here to offer you insights, challenge your perspectives, and ignite your curiosity. So whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, there's something here for you. Join me on this journey of exploration as we make sense of the complex world of business, one conversation at a time. Let's dive into today's episode of Plain Spoken. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Plain Spoken. It has been the better part of about 6 years since I have recorded a podcast, and I apologize for that for my tens of listeners out there. I'm just kidding. I don't know how many listeners I have because I don't do this for listeners. I actually did this when I started or when I rebooted Plain Strategy Group for a couple of reasons. One was to have a platform to share information, knowledge, experience, what to do, what not to do, all that sort of stuff with a different audience than one can reach via a blogging platform. The second was to try and figure out a way to connect with other professionals and have meaningful conversations, which is why we started off doing sort of that interview style. But all of them have been longer format than this platform typically likes, unless you're one of the big players in the industry who has a massive following. It evolved over time as I continued to meander my way through my new world into talking about areas of technology or areas of business focus that I thought would be interesting and be useful to the listeners out there, and having folks on from time to time. Well, as fate would have it, I have latched on to a company that I spend a lot of time with, that I like a great deal. And it's funny, for any of you consultants out there or fractional CXO type people, I used to joke all the time in consulting that when you start with a new client relationship, it's like dating. And I think I may have even mentioned this on a previous podcast if you're one of the diehards who listens on a regular basis. And when you start dating, you go out a few times, you have dinner, you go to some movies, maybe you take some trips here and there. And I joke around all the time about how every once in a while, maybe you get to leave a toothbrush over, or you get a drawer in the apartment, and maybe then you live together. And I always had this sort of life cycle that went towards what was a traditional relationship evolutionary pattern in my generation, all the way up to marriage. And what's funny with my current client is I didn't expect to be this into them as early as I have been, and I'm super excited that I am. And I'm doing great stuff with them. And at some point in the podcast, it'll make sense to share that information. But for right now, I also had no idea if they would be that into me. And that's one of the neat things about what I had been doing and what I am doing today, and what many of you are out there doing now, which is working with different clients and seeing whether or not you want to spend more time with them or they want you to spend more time with them. For me, in my life situation, this is working out really well because I'm getting to work with some incredible people and some great spaces, but most importantly, with a company that has some tremendous values and truly lives the values and lives their purpose. The downside to that is some of the creative outlet that I used to do on a more regular basis, because I had the time, because I had sort of varied smaller clients and more free time available to do blog writing or podcast production, has sort of fallen by the wayside. Now, we make trade-offs all the time, and this is a trade-off that I've made with eyes wide open. So I do apologize for those of you who enjoy these things, that the frequency isn't what they should be. And I have to apologize to myself, and I wrote a blog about this just before the holidays, that I need to develop the discipline to do these things anyway, even when they're hard. I feel like if I had a post-production editor, we'd drop a Kennedy clip in here about going to the moon. But as it turned out, we've had a really interesting sidebar conversation, not at all related necessarily to what we do at that company, but around artificial intelligence, which is, a hot topic anywhere that is even technology adjacent nowadays. Now, for quite some time, AI and ML, or machine learning, have become buzzwords and hot buttons for people to talk about. You could stick AI on the back end of anything, and people all of a sudden thought you were important. But there were some really intense heating up of conversations around artificial intelligence. And I am, just so you get a full disclaimer, I am no expert in artificial intelligence. I did not go to Cal Berkeley or MIT. I am not an academic. I do not have deep understanding or knowledge beyond what I have learned on the universal learning platform that is known as YouTube. But I have been a technologist for the better part of 3 decades, and I have seen some shit, as they say. So when I hear people talk about AI changing the world, I don't doubt it. And one of my favorite podcasts, which is Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast, he has often and for quite some time, along with others, warned of the risk, the existential risk that AGI, or artificial general intelligence, could pose to humanity. And I know that takes us all the way down to the iRobot world. But as we look at what AI can do, the the concepts and the backdrop of this conversation was, how disruptive will AI as we see it now and for the next, call it, 12 to 18 months be to the world? I was sent a podcast. It's All In Podcast, which I was not a listener of, and I doubt that I will become a listener of. I didn't particularly care for the podcast, not to disparage their talent. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But there was an assertion made that AI is getting so good that it will rapidly, meaning near term, and I took that to mean within the next 12 to 18 months, take what was postulated as a $5 trillion software market down to $500 million. And the auspices under which this was being asserted was that AI has gotten so good that even a non-developer can leverage AI tools. And most of the time, when they're talking about AI tools like this, they're talking about the big boys, OpenAI or Anthropic or one of those, um, along with what are called no-code tools. And they could use AI to create their own line of business software. To give you the sort of TLDR version or TLDV version, um, AI can be used to do a ton of things. It can write documents for you, it can review documents, it can write code, it can do testing. Specifically, they were talking about AI agents, which are essentially sets of code that are built specifically to do a thing. So you could have an AI marketing agent who specializes in social media, and that AI agent would almost be like an AI employee. And so knowledge workers would rapidly be replaced by these AI agents who can work 24 hours a day, work faster than humans, not require compensation, right? And so we'll see this massive impact. And in fact, I wrote a blog about the risk that AI could pose to certain classes of workers quite some time ago. And I think that that risk is real. I think there are absolutely job types that could be obviated by the use of artificial intelligence. Um, and I don't mean to disparage AI, because it's incredibly interesting technology, and the advances are massive. The impact is something we probably won't even understand for 10 years after the impact has been felt. But we've had revolutions like this before. This is the ever-present evolutionary growth of technology. Now, the video that I ended up watching as a sidebar, because we were having this conversation in Signal back and forth, it was a really good sort of pseudo academic conversation amongst friends and professional colleagues. Uh, Somehow, in the serendipitous nature of the universe, I ended up getting prompted for a video that I'm looking at over here called "This AI Technology Will Replace Millions, and Here's How to Prepare" by Liam Otley, on his channel. And Liam's a very good presenter. I'd never heard of Liam before, and I watched this 53-minute video, and he too was talking about AI agents. Now, it will surprise no one that he has his own school learning thing that teach you how to do this and how to create your own agents, and that's fine. I'm not kicking sand in his face about going off and doing cool stuff. But the assertions were very similar, which is AI is coming, you better learn how to use it, and here is how it will rapidly change the entire universe. Now, whether you're talking about any kind of new code, new technology, automation, I mean, we could go all the way back to assembly line. Every time you see big leaps forward, someone is left behind who has to get retooled. Now, when you bring automation into an environment, typically the story that you tell is, hey, we understand that people are worried that their jobs are going to be taken away by automation. But what this does is it frees up your human persons to go off and do more higher value, important things that require the capabilities that a human has, and let the automation do that other stuff. It's commodity. It doesn't matter as much, and it can be done, and if it's done by automation, it'll be done better, smarter, faster, etc. And they can go do other things. Now, that is sometimes true. Probably more often than not, it has been true. But it is the case that with every layer of advancement, people do get left behind. So AI agents being the next one, I think is an interesting case. So in this video, and I won't go through the whole video, but I do encourage you to watch it. And if I'm smart enough, I'll put a link in here. But if I'm not smart enough or I'm too damn lazy, it's easy to find on YouTube. Like I said, it's This AI Technology Will Replace Millions by Liam Otley. The discussion started being had about how fast this could happen and how you could have agents, and this goes back to the All In podcast, that would connect to other agents. And one of the scenarios that Liam painted that was sort of insinuated in the All In podcast was, let's say you're a small business owner and you have a chatbot. That's fine now, but that's necessary but not sufficient. It needs to be able to do other things like take actions, not just respond to plain text queries, which is good but not great. But they even inverted it where an individual human could have their own AI assistant, an AI agent assistant. Let's say that I, in my home, needed a new roof. I could have my AI agent go call all the roofing companies in town and get the pricing and get all the information, negotiate it and settle it, and simply update me with which one we selected. If I gave the AI agent enough information that allowed it to properly negotiate in my stead. This sounds like every Jetsons discussion we've had on every technology discussion ever since the dawn of time. Are we getting closer? Well, it certainly seems like it. Conversational AI has come leaps and bounds. Now, the complexities of doing this are non-trivial. And why we're glossing over the complexities is a little bit beyond me. But some of the details that were offered were interesting in that you'd have in some near-term future this concept of an agent ID. So just like you have an email address or a Twitter or X handle, you'd have, or a phone number, you'd have an agent ID. And that agent ID would allow other agents, AI agents, to speak to each other in a way that they understand. Now, if you're a computer person or a technology person, you understand the concept of application program interfaces or APIs. This is defining a set of nouns and verbs and actions that allow activity, data exchange, booking things on your calendar, right? So think about the asking about roofing. My AI agent would need to hear all the information that it needs to know about me and my job, the size of my house, the pitch of my roof, the kind of shingles I'm interested in, various stuff. I'm not a roofing expert, but insert all of the details around a roof. And then the AI agent would need to go look up roofing companies that service my area, then reach out to those companies either via email or online or via phone and use a speech interface and have a negotiation and iterate back and forth on price. Let's just say, for argument's sake, all of that could happen and we take away all of the complexities of, do the roofing companies also have an agent? So we have an agent to agent communication. If not, are they willing to talk to what essentially becomes like spam because all of a sudden now everyone has an AI agent that can do price arbitrage across 400 companies, right? There's a bunch of stuff there that we'd have to unpack. But let's just say, for argument's sake, this was doable and it got a booking. It then has to go back, inform me in some form or fashion, book it into my calendar, and then ostensibly be tied into my finances so it can articulate or execute the financial transaction. These are all things that are doable. You could certainly paint a picture and build a system that allows this to happen. And in fact, in the enterprise, this is what we do. We go and we find these processes that are important and we try and make them magical. We try and reduce friction. There are a bunch of places where this gets really, really problematic. Most notably, systems of record that are antiquated, old databases with bad data or no database. Now, in the All In podcast and in this podcast or in this video, there's a lot of glossing over how hard this is. There's discussions about how really smart people, I'm not even arguing that, folks like Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and all these guys say, well, it's really just what's called a CRUD database with some business logic on top. And all the business logic will go into the AI agent, and then you just need a database on the back end, and then magic happens. That magic happens part is a lot of shit to get done. So this is a topic I think we could talk about often. And if you happen to listen to this and want to give feedback, I'd love to have the conversations with you because It's not that I don't think we should go try and do those things. I actually think we should. Um, but when you create these black boxes where things just happen and you no longer know why the things happen, they are just sort of interpolated, there's risk. And so you have to be very cautious about that. So that's before, and that sort of opens the door to the things that would normally stop advancement, or if not stop, slow the advancement, like regulatory compliance, privacy, legal stuff, non technical things, right? Do you have permission? Do you have access? Is it legal to do? Um, we've already seen that with the sort of antiquated systems of old and what are called recommendation engines, right? Do you have the right to retain preferences of a user and then make decisions based on that down the road? We're in sort of uncharted territory there about how that would evolve, enhance moving forward. But these really smart folks are all saying essentially, if you're a business, you'll no longer go use HubSpot. You'll just write your own CRM tool, because what is CRM anyway? It's just a CRUD database with some business logic on top. That is a grotesque oversimplification, and I hate CRM tools. But in the interest of exploration, I decided I would embark on a test. So, listening to this video, and again, it's a good video. I do recommend you watch it and watch videos like this. It is clearly a burgeoning area that we all need to become educated on. And the advancements are happening so rapidly. What tomorrow looks like is really kind of hard to see sometimes because the advancements are significant. I did a running narrative on my phone. So just taking voice notes about things that were said, things that I agreed with or disagreed with, my thoughts, the implications, etc. At the end of watching this 53-minute video, I ended up with like a 30-minute voice annotation. Now, side note, I'm an Android guy, not an iPhone guy. I use voice recorder because it does transcription. And for some reason, it broke it into 3 segments accidentally, which was stupid. So even that basic function on a phone is either stupid user tricks, certainly possible, or shitty UI. But I ended up with these 3 audio files that then became 3 transcripts. And my goal was to use ChatGPT's latest version. Actually, I think I used 4.0, not 4.01. So caveated appropriately. And I was going to pass it these transcripts. And the task was simple, and it should have been something simple for ChatGPT at this level of evolution to do. I wanted it to clean the transcripts because they had like speaker notations, like speaker 1 and timestamps on each line. I wanted to strip those. I wanted to clean up spelling and grammar, but not change content, and give me one resultant document that represented my stream of consciousness output as a result of this meeting. I then, once I got to that point, wanted it to review and make recommendations. And we would iterate on the document until I ended up with a document that represented a cleaned up version that I could present to my team that we were having this conversation about. Hence the whole point. I actually thought this was going to be pretty light work for ChatGPT because I use ChatGPT all the time. I find it to be incredibly useful for cleaning up documents and expanding on ideas. It's really, really, absolutely great. So this incredibly simple task became incredibly complicated. And I started it's funny. So, fun fact, after I did this, and I'll tell you the whole story, but I was so frustrated, I knew I was going to do a podcast about it because I wanted to share this. And I had ChatGPT itself within the session where it had the memory of all of our interactions and failures build my podcast outline, which is here. I have a little podcast out. If you're on video, you can see it. If you're listening on Spotify, you can't. So the way it titled things was really very creative. Round 1, early optimism. Rounds 2 through 6, the loop of frustration. So it almost has a sense of humor. Now it pulls that from my tone and style, which is great, which is, I guess, me giving myself credit for having a sense of humor. But what's funny is when you look at round 1, I gave it the information. I gave it a pretty clear task. Remove the speaker tags and timestamps, enhance the content with clarity and annotations based on feedback, divide the transcript into logical sections for easier consumption, and save the results in 2 formats: a clean version and an enhanced automated version. Or I'm sorry, annotated version. So I was excited. I thought it would go, but the first cut was incomplete, truncated, and lacked the structure that I requested entirely. Sections were missing. and no logical division was present. In fact, it said it was complete. And until I looked at it and told it it wasn't, it thought it was complete. And this brings up an interesting piece. I don't know that this is considered what folks refer to as hallucinations or not. But Chat GPT thought it had done the task and asserted that it had done the task. So if this was a transaction that was a headless transaction, my agent talking to the roofing agent, and it just booked the appointment, how do I know that it booked one that does the job I want it to do? Now, I'm technical enough to know that if you're doing this at the agent to agent level, you'll have to have a lot more rigor and discipline around the API layer, the interface layer that allows cross checks and confirmations. But for text, that's easy enough to do as well. Like you would think if I asked you to take the speaker tags out, output it this way, you would then read the thing that you did to make sure you actually did the task, which it clearly did not. So over the next couple of hours, not dedicated, just as I was doing other stuff, I would go back there and ask it to do things. I kept reiterating my requirements. And each time it would miss big portions of it or would fail to complete the feedback. And at one point, it reminded me that I asked, why do you think this attempt will work when the last 5 failed? The response was optimistic, but ultimately proved inaccurate. So I do have a tendency to talk to AI the way I talk to humans because I think that's the way that it would learn best. Round 7 to 10, exhaustion sets in. And I'm going to read ChatGPT's text because it's actually quite funny. By the afternoon, my patience was wearing thin. I re-uploaded the files, clarified instructions, and even broke the task into smaller chunks. Despite these efforts, the AI continued to stumble. It seemed incapable of maintaining context across multiple iterations or handling a task of this complexity. The breakdown of time, we started at 9 a.m. in the morning, Eastern, not that that matters. We gave up at 5:30 p.m. We had 10 attempts and 8.5 hours of effort. Again, not constant, dedicated effort, but intermittently. So the amount of effort that went into it and the fact that it wasn't transparent about why is a problem. And so the lessons, I said, well, tell me the lessons that we've learned in this process. And it said, persistence isn't always efficient. No shit. AI is powerful but limited. That's true. But holy crap, limited to this basic piece? And yes, I'm going to tell you the answer to the puzzle in a minute. And humans are still essential. Now, in Liam Otley's video, he talks about a marketing firm or a company that has a marketing department. And so instead of having this massive marketing department with a graphic designer and a social media marketer and all these other people, he envisions a world where you have just a sort of CMO who has all of these AI agents that do those things and they can operate faster, smarter, and better and iterate quicker. And you just need the CMO. Again, using the sort of old school trope, which is humans can just elevate up the value chain to higher level or higher value tasks, assuming that the other tasks are just going to get done. And that is certainly one way to look at it. But the irony for this whole thing was this very basic task of text manipulation was beyond the capability of one of the better AIs out there. Now, there are those of you amongst the crowd that will say, well, you just don't know how to use AI. And that may be entirely true. But I am more technical than the average bear. And I couldn't get this thing to work. So I started to suspect that this was a size issue. Keep your snickering to yourself. I tend to be a bit loquacious, which means I use a lot of words. I don't mean to talk down to you or condescend, but I did it twice. That's just silly. Why would I do that on my own podcast? Anyway, as it turns out, there was a lot of words in my 30-minute ramble. And so I thought, okay. So I told the AI explicitly to break the incoming stream into sections, thinking that it could handle its own memory management. Fun fact, it can't. Now, it doesn't ever tell you that. Sometimes I have seen it when you give it a file, it says that this file is too large, or if you put too much into the actual paste buffer into the website, it doesn't like that, but you can give it a file that's larger. But there was no hard feedback that says, hey, you've exceeded my capacity of memory, manually break this into chunks, which is how I eventually was able to use it partially to do this task, was I broke the 30,000 characters, I guess, that it represented into 10,000 character chunks, and then it could process it. But throughout this entire process, it never once told me that. And it kept thinking that if it just tried again, line by line, and breaking it into sections, and it would break it into sections, it would give me 2 sections that were done absolutely perfectly. And then ask me, would you like me to continue? Yes. Yes, I would like you to continue. This is exactly what I was hoping for. And then it would move forward and it would get 3 or 4 more sections done. But I'd have to tell it every time. I'd say, this is correct. Do the rest of the document. 3 sections later, are you sure? So there was an implicit thing where it almost knew, hey, I'm going to screw this up if I go too far. But it wasn't telling me that. It was just annoying the shit out of me by bringing this up. And I'm like, just do the rest of the document. Pretend you asked me the question. I don't care how you do it. And I started seeing parallels with staff that aren't particularly well trained, but are well intentioned. Um, and you have to use what's called directive behavior. You have to give them every step of every piece and check on every item versus someone that you can actually delegate work to, which is what you really want an AI agent to do. Like what I really wanted is to be able to throw this over the desk at someone and say, hey, here's all the raw data. Here's what I need done. And then I don't care if it takes you 20 minutes or 2 hours, tell me how long it'll take, but get the job done. And when you say you've done it, at least have hit the 80 or 90% mark, not the 20% mark, which is what we got. So the irony of efficiency was that this was an incredibly inefficient uh, process that we ended up going through. Now, there's a lot more to the video, and I'll probably do at least one other podcast on that video because I thought Liam did a really nice job. There were a couple of assertions, which was that one of the first pieces that will happen with AI agents or the proliferation of AI agents will be sort of the demise of the smartphone, right? Because as an input model, it's considered inefficient, right? Right now, we type into computers and the computers do things. Um, and then we can speak into computers and computers will do things. And then ideally, we can continue to add our senses. And one of the examples he uses in his video is he has you sit in the room, look at a part of the room, close your eyes, and then think about how incredibly detailed the vision you have of that room would be. And getting AI to have that much stimulus or data would allow it to do incredible things, but we don't have a way to do that yet. And he sort of talked about the idea of AR glasses, wrist controls, things like that for finger manipulation, and earpods or AirPods, always listening and allowing you to talk. Now we'll have people, instead of looking down their phone, talking to themselves and twiddling in the air and things like that. Um, Humans seem to like being human. Autonomous driving is a great example. I've had an autonomous driving vehicle since 2016. I believe, honestly, that even the bad autonomous driving vehicles are better than a lot of humans. And if we would just all agree to let the cars drive themselves and pick one of the front runners, accidents would probably go down because autonomous driving doesn't get bored. It doesn't text. It doesn't look at the attractive person in the passenger seat. It doesn't get distracted by other accidents on the road. The cars could negotiate with one another to make sure that they allowed people in. They could understand the zipper, which people still don't understand in driving, at least in Florida. And generally speaking, we would arrive at a position where the point was to get from point A to point B. But as soon as you add a single human driver to that who decides it is more important for them to get there 7 minutes faster, everything breaks down. I think the same thing happens a lot of times when we want to automate other things. But this is the beginning of a lengthy discussion about artificial intelligence. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on AI, how it's impacting you, how you see it impacting your world. I certainly see it impacting software on a regular basis. Do I see it replacing my developers to write code? No. Do I see them using tools the way they've always used tools to improve their code, to optimize algorithms? Yes. Just like I see every form of automation and have seen for the better part of 30 years. Are these better? Yeah. Are they smarter? Undoubtedly. Are they faster? Yup. But the All In podcast really focused on the fact as compute cost goes to a limit approaching zero, meaning it goes down in cost, these will become ubiquitous. And I just don't see that happening any more than I can see that the operating systems that we use have become any more incredible, given the fact that we've increased the horsepower behind them, and they largely do a lot of the same things. If you ever had a chance to run Windows 95 on a newer generation piece of hardware, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. With increased compute comes increased laziness, reduction in optimization, bloat, and inefficiency. So, where I think there's a huge win here is if AI can be used to drive efficiency, that's always great. But as far as replacing human persons and doing the things that they do, I don't see it happening today or tomorrow. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. So thanks for tuning in. Again, I will try and do this more often than I have. This is a fun format, these 30-minute segments. And at the end of the day, I ended up doing most of this work manually, piecemealing some of the AI help, which it still did help. And if you're not using these tools, get out there and play with them. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there, Gemini, ChatGPT, a Copilot within Microsoft. It's certainly a great frontier to be playing with. And in your particular businesses, I'd love to hear how are you using AI to make your teams better, smarter, faster, more capable, how you're using it for education, and how often you trust it. Because it's quick to say, ChatGPT will make mistakes. Be sure to verify your work. But when ChatGPT answers you, ChatGPT is definitive in that it did the job right. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks so much for tuning into another episode of Plain Spoken. I hope today's conversation sparked some new ideas and left you with a few takeaways to ponder or implement in your own journey. If you enjoyed the show and found value in our dialogue, I'd be really grateful if you could hit the subscribe button. Sharing this podcast with your network helps us grow and continue to bring you insightful and engaging content. Don't forget, you can find us on LinkedIn and a few other social platforms. Follow us, interact with our posts, and join the Plain Spoken community. Your thoughts, feedback, and ideas are what keep this conversation going. So please drop us a line or leave us a comment. Thanks again for joining me, Derek Fournier, on Plain Spoken. Keep an eye out for our next episode, and until then, keep growing.